What's something you learned embarrassingly late in life? Story 1. It took me 18 years to realize shampoo goes before conditioner. I always wondered why my hair felt silky smooth before I used the shampoo. That is correct, but if you have dry hair, you can also use conditioner first and let it soak into your hair, then shampoo your scalp. Wash both things out together and then use conditioner again. It's called the CWC method and is really helpful. It depends on your hair texture, to be honest. I don't remember how old I was when I was informed different races have different hair care practices. I think Oprah said it. Story 2. I'm from Mississippi, and until I was 18, I thought that everyone else in the country counted with their own state, i.e., instead of one Mississippi to Mississippi, they would count one Nevada to Nevada, or one Maryland to Maryland, etc. Well, I'm from Alabama, and I thought everyone on Earth used Mississippi to count the length of a second. I thought it was the universal word. Then on Seinfeld, Elaine used banana. I thought as a teen that must be a New York thing. If you're from Transylvania, then it's one two and so on. That means time moves faster in shorter states or countries, right? Story 3. It wasn't until I was about 20 that I discovered that you're supposed to add water to condensed soup. I vividly remember eating condensed tomato soup in my dorm room without any water, so I was essentially eating ketchup. So my mom does this. I came over to her house one day after she got off work, and she said that she was going to eat a snack. A few minutes later, she comes into the living room with an open can of condensed chicken soup and a spoon and is just eating it straight from the can. Okay, I just remembered that I'm even dumber. The only condensed soup I've ever cooked was tomato, and I always add a can of milk to make the cream of tomato soup. I babysat my cousin when I was about 16 and made him condensed vegetable soup, but I didn't add a can of water because I never made the connection. Like, I wasn't going to add milk, so I just add nothing? I'm not sure what my thought process was, and my cousin was like a year old and not talking, so he just kinda let me feed it to him. I only knew there was an issue because I put the leftover away and my aunt commented that it looked weird when she got home. I forgot about it until right now. I guess people don't read directions on soup. Also, they must love that salty taste and pudding-like texture. Story 4. My dad was fond of framing questions to my brother and/or me regarding what on earth we were doing, up to the age of 10 or so when it no longer seemed necessary, using the term "pray tell," as in, what are you doing with the tools, pray tell? I presumed a pray tell was a gentle equivalent to goofball or dummy. One day, I corrected my brother about some misconception he had, addressing him as a "you pray tell." "What did you call him?" asked Dad, who happened to be nearby. "A pray tell. You call us that all the time." "I do?" "Yeah, you say, what is that supposed to be, pray tell?" I'd never seen him laugh through a facepalm before. When I was young, my father said to me, "Knowledge is power," Francis Bacon. I understood it as, knowledge is power, France is bacon. For more than a decade, I wondered about the meaning of the second part and what was the surreal linkage between the two. If I said the quote to someone, "Knowledge is power, France is bacon," they nodded knowingly. Or someone might say, "Knowledge is power," and I'd finish the quote, "France is bacon," and they wouldn't look at me like I'd said something very odd, but thoughtfully agree. I did ask a teacher what "knowledge is power, Francis Bacon" meant, and got a full 10-minute explanation of the "knowledge is power" bit, but nothing on Francis Bacon. When I prompted further explanation by saying, "Francis Bacon?" in a questioning tone, I just got a yes. At 12, I didn't have the confidence to press it further. I just accepted it as something I'd never understand. It wasn't until years later I saw it written down that the penny dropped. When I was a kid, there was a sweeping turn on a hill near our house. We used to drive through there all the time. I would always see signs on the side of the road as we drove. There was a sign reading, "Road narrows," and then a heap of directional arrow signs to point traffic around the turn, lest they drive straight off the hill. Anywho, in my dumb kid brain, I thought "road narrows" was a special term to refer to these arrow signs that immediately followed. It never occurred to me to mean something else, and I thought this for years. So we're out driving in the country one day, and we go through another "road narrows" sign, but it was just by itself, and no other signs came after. I'm sitting there puzzled as the cogs are slowly turning in my brain. Before I said to my family, "Wait, there are no road narrows here." My parents were like, "Sure it does. See, the road was wider, this bit is thinner." Then I realized how dumb I had been for years. I consider these totally forgivable and kind of cute. They are surely family legends by now. Story 5. Until I was 23, I thought ponies were just baby horses. I know, right? I always thought ponies were just child horses. Then I was at work one day and a girl was saying how she wanted a pony because she didn't think she could handle taking care of a full-sized horse. And I told her that I thought that was a little naive, since it would eventually become a full-sized horse. She looked at me like I was an idiot, which I was/am, and asked, "Hold on, do you think ponies are just baby horses?" To which I replied, "Are they not?" I never really had any experience with horses, so I just knew that ponies were small horses, and assumed that it was like how puppies were child dogs. Ponies were therefore child horses. I read this and started laughing uncontrollably, so I summarize your story for my girlfriend as I'm continuing to laugh. At the end, she just stares at me and says, "Huh? So they aren't horses?" She's 41. Maybe we all need to take a field trip to a farm to learn about animals, what they are and what they aren't. Story 6. Things aren't supposed to start to get blurry at about 15 to 20 feet. Learned I needed glasses at like 26 from one of these threads. Yes, people, you are supposed to be able to see individual leaves on trees. Hope someone else can be helped like I was. I'll never forget the first time I looked up into the night sky after I got glasses and realized that you can, in fact, see the moon clearly. I assumed people who depicted it in art were taking creative license because they knew it should look like that for some reason, and that the human eye was incapable of seeing the moon without also seeing two other blurrier moons, sort of overlapping it. It blew my mind. I can see most things pretty well, so I never realized I might need glasses until I was watching a lunar eclipse with some friends and asked, "Can you guys also see two moons?" No, it turns out people with good vision only see one moon, but it's mostly astigmatism rather than short/long-sightedness, so it doesn't affect me much. It's surprisingly easy to overlook, no pun intended, eye problems because they are usually slow, gradual changes. One of the Redditors said they started getting better grades in school when a teacher moved their chair closer to the board. Story 7. Moving cross-country, driving east to west, crossing from Idaho to Oregon, I noticed huge fields with signs for the Ora, Idaho Potato Company. So I was in my early 20s when I figured out Ora-Ida wasn't just a brand name, but was because their potatoes came from Oregon and Idaho. Kinda similarly, canola oil is called that because it was primarily produced from Canadian rapeseeds and was an ola oil, and it also sounds better than rapeseed oil. On the west coast of Florida, we have something kinda similar. The Tam-Miami Trail. It's a road that goes from Tampa all the way to Miami, and was the main route down there before the interstates were built. I didn't know any of these things. Not a one. This probably means I have to be a little less judgmental about the other posts. Story 8. Let me tell you about how I thought you were awarded a Pulitzer Prize, not a Pulitzer Prize. I thought there was a popular spicy southern dish called Flamin' Yawn. I finally saw filet mignon written down and spoken aloud simultaneously, via subtitles in a movie. Then googled Flamin' Yawn and got nothing and put 2 and 2 together. Not too late in life, but I thought my parents were making rum and cokes until I went to college, which I think is a much better name for the drink anyway, rum and coke. These stories are amazing and I love them all. I also enjoyed tech support instead of tech support, super salad instead of soup or salad, and prima donna instead of prima donna. Story 9. I learned that pork and beans is not called cowboy beans. I was 18 and asked a grocery store clerk to help me find the cowboy beans. We were looking everywhere and I was getting frustrated because I knew that every store carries these beans. After a while, I pick up a pork and beans can with a picture and say, "See, it looks just like this." He says, "You mean pork and beans?" Then I realized that my mom called them that so that I would eat them. The look of disappointment from that grocery store clerk haunts me to this day. Cowboy beans are a real thing, and different families make it different, but it's generally baked beans with added meat, so pork and beans would technically qualify, although usually there's a higher meat ratio if you make them for a potluck or something. My family recipe has bacon, ground beef, and maybe a little ground Italian if you're feeling fancy. Also, sometimes other types of canned beans are added and simmered in the sauce for a bit. For everyone asking how this differs from chili, the only way I've seen them made around me is with Bush's baked beans for a homemade but still similar sauce as the base. So it's a sweet molasses/brown sugar sauce versus a chili seasoned tomato-based sauce. Also more bacon than one would usually put in chili. Grocery worker here, mispronunciations are rife. A coworker told me about a customer asking for sriracha and almost paged out the name before figuring out he was asking for sriracha. Someone asking for jalapeno chips said no, that's jalapeno when shown them. And I myself went an embarrassingly long time not connecting written quinoa with the name quinoa. Funny story, I unknowingly called sriracha for the first 25 years of my life before my spouse finally asked me why I called it that, and I just looked confused. Now I'm hungry and I want to put bacon in chili, and in baked beans, or maybe just on a plate by itself. Also, a personal anecdote about quinoa, I used to call it quinoa for years before I heard someone else say the name out loud. Story 10. I suspected it was the same with lots of people, but I found out it wasn't guerrilla warfare, but guerrilla warfare, maybe in my 20s. The disappointments of growing up, they just keep coming. My aunt told me a story about their time as missionaries in Ethiopia. One involved a house of some local official being surrounded by guerrillas with machine guns, and the house residents praying all night, etc. I could never understand why guerrillas would be outside someone's house all night, and why they had guns. As a grade schooler, I was in church listening to the priest's sermon. He was talking about a guerrilla war in another country and a scenario of these Christian missionaries who were made to kneel with guns to their heads. The guerrillas gave them a choice: denounce Jesus or we'll kill you, and blah blah blah, they die. And how amazing it is that they are brave enough to die rather than denounce God. Meanwhile, I was absolutely horrified to hear that guerrillas were shooting people and they're atheists. My mom was so confused when I cried when she surprised me with tickets to Disney's Tarzan. This one is definitely understandable, and by that I mean I did the same thing. Story 11. I thought that horses had toes until I was 22. I thought the hoof was a horseshoe and the toes were tucked inside. How did I learn how wrong I was, you ask? I was walking past a cavalry museum and saw a horse statue and loudly remarked, "It must hurt so bad when they fold a horse's toes to put them in the shoe." Dozens of horse enthusiasts turned and looked at me with wild bewilderment in their eyes. Well, horses do have toes, 1 toe per foot. Horses' nearest relatives are rhinoceroses, which have 3 toes per foot. Horses and rhinos are classified as perissodactyls, odd-toed, hoofed animals, as opposed to the much more diverse and numerous artiodactyls, even-toed, hoofed animals. Ancient ancestors of the horse did have multiple toes per foot, and over a long period of time the middle toe became the more prominent, and the other toes became smaller and smaller. Modern horses have vestigial, non-functional toes on the sides of their feet. I'm now imagining that instead of hearing a clip-clop, it would be more like a slap, 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 as if someone was wearing flippers, just in case you needed more distress. If you want even more distress, look up newborn horse hooves, also called fairy fingers. I learned a lot from this thread, but I wish I hadn't looked up about the newborns. Story 12. A few months ago, 2 of my colleagues both handed in their notice at around the same time. I kept reading/hearing the sentence "they're both moving on to pastures new" being thrown about the office in weeks leading up to them leaving, and I hadn't heard this phrase before, and thought that was the name of the rival company that they were going to. I thought it was weird that nobody was talking about how they were both leaving for the same company. I was in the car with one of the ones who was leaving and said, "So where are you and X going to be working? Is it?" And just before I could embarrass myself and say "pastures new," they interrupted me and said they're not going to the same place and asked me where I had heard that. I think at that moment I realized I was stupid and didn't mention it again. I personally have never heard someone say it that way. I've always heard greener pastures. Yikes, I always thought that moving on to greener pastures meant that someone had died. This is a most informative thread. As a city girl born and raised, I recently learned this is literally true for small farmers raising cattle on grass. They'll eat all the grass down to freshly mowed length. The farmers move them to an area with high grass. The old grass grows back, rinse and repeat. Field trip time, let's learn about the farm some more. Story 13. This is something my little sister did through high school. We're about 8 years apart, so we never overlapped in school. She's always been a straight-A student, and I found out she worked extra hard because she wanted to catch up to me in school, so that we could be in school at the same time. I almost cried, and for those of you who asked, yes, my sister not only caught up, but surpassed me. She's a beautiful young woman who graduated with high honors in psychology and is going on to complete a master's degree. You just unlocked a memory of mine. My sister told me at her little first grade ceremony, "I'm gonna catch up to you," and then got very upset that I also moved up a grade. She thought it was a race and not age-based. My sister thought if she could do the monkey bars, she could go to kindergarten with me. She was the best damn toddler on the bars and was very unhappy to find out that proficiency on the playground had nothing to do with admission to kindergarten. These kid-level assumptions are so sweet. They just want to be with their siblings and have playtime. I can relate. Story 14. My sister, a nurse, didn't learn until her mid-20s that rabbits did not in fact lay eggs. A lot of people struggle with eggs as a premise. I've heard a lot of vegans who are unaware that eggs come from chickens, and others who are unaware that they are meat products. People often are unsure what lays an egg and what gets the egg fertilized in them. They often do or do not make the connection that eggs in the store are unfertilized, and many don't understand that the yolk is what would have become a chicken. All in all, eggs are the one thing that stands out to me as a very simple premise, for me personally, that I always have to tread lightly when speaking to strangers, because you never know how much they do or don't know about them. Also, people are highly defensive about eggs. Like if you tell them a fact that contradicts what they think, they are more likely than with other mundane subjects to get very angry with you. Wait, now that I think about it, that makes sense. Why does the Easter Bunny carry Easter eggs? It should be an Easter chicken. I can see how this line of thought continues until you really put some thought into it. I guess rabbits are a symbol of fertility and eggs are a sign of rebirth, all of which is spring, and it just gets muddled up. That and the Cadbury commercial where the rabbit makes chicken noises. Story 15. In the last year, I found out peanut butter is brown. I'm 34 and horrendously colorblind. If that wasn't obvious, I thought it was green. I mean, now you're really down the color perception rabbit hole. It isn't like colors are real. They are just a way our brains have interpreting a number of sensory inputs to help us interact with the world around us. As I said to another colorblind Redditor, I think it's more accurate to say you don't distinguish certain ranges of color than to say you see some colors and not others. You can see all of them. Some of them that look different to me just look the same to you. As for whether your orange qualifies, who can know, man? None of us have any way of knowing what other people's sense perceptions are. Even two people with identical ability to distinguish one color from another might have radically different subjective color experiences. They just have no way to talk about it. Prepare to have your mind blown. I have multiple sclerosis and went fully blind in my left eye due to optic neuritis for a few weeks. Then as my vision started to return, I could see faint shadows. Then in black and white, but with horrible focus. And then red-green colorblind, and now I have horrible focus still, but I'm still moderately red-green colorblind, but only in my left eye. My right eye is normal, so I can close one eye and see regular colors or close the other eye and see what colorblind people see. I have no idea why, but blue tones are way more bright, almost like they are lit from behind. Blues and purples are far more beautiful from my left eye. I desperately want this last person to produce some paintings to show us non-colorblind people what being colorblind looks like. They'd have to switch back and forth between their types of vision to do it, and it would take forever probably, but I want this in our lives. Story 16. Just this week, I found out about the little button on the back of the socket driver that pushes the socket off. I have owned the same socket set for about 30 years, and I have a dedicated screwdriver that I keep with my sockets and use to pry them off when I'm done using them. I will be 55 years old soon. I was probably 50 when I learned that the other button on my hand mixer ejected the beaters. I always just yanked them off. The funny thing is that my sister asked me about how to remove the beaters. I just shrugged and said, I just pull them out. And she pushed the button like, voila, blew my mind. The topic of kitchen things reminded me my college roommate was mind blown when she watched me use a corkscrew wine opener. She would screw it into the cork and then just leave it with the arms out, shaped like a T, and just yank really hard until the cork was out. One day she was having trouble and I saw her doing that, so I was like, I can do it, and she watched me leverage the arm against the bottle to pull the cork out and couldn't believe it. Dude, I just learned that the little loop/tag/extended bit on vegetable peelers is for removing potato eyes and bad spots. I am here for all of you people needing this info to go about your daily lives. I knew these things, but maybe you don't. Sharing is caring. Story 17. You don't have to rip the plastic top off of your new deodorant with your teeth or pliers or anything. You can just turn the base until it comes up enough to just take it out. Okay, now I'm super curious as to why this is a shared experience. Why do our monkey brains go straight to brute force instead of logic when it comes to deodorant packaging? I think because many products come with seals and step one is to always remove it. I can't think of another example where you use a feature of the product to remove the seal. Sure, some products have fancy seals with elaborate instructions, but in the deodorant seal example, you crank up the deodorant like you do when using it, then remove the seal. It's unique. I'm glad I noticed this on my own so I don't feel too left out, but for years I did have trouble pulling it off. Story 18. Jackalopes are mythical creatures. I was 18, I think, To be fair, I've seen a platypus, rhino, and giraffe. Those are some ridiculous animals, right? And how the heck is a narwhal real, while a unicorn is mythical? I didn't learn that reindeer were real animals until I was 23 and made a joke with my flight crew, was a flight attendant, when our transport van drove past a reindeer farm. I said, "What do they do? Dress up deer to look like reindeer?" Was a very embarrassing moment for me for sure. For the record, rhinos are real, narwhals are real, cougars, pumas, and mountain lions are real and all the same thing. Platypus are real, but are difficult to accept as real because they seem so mashed together. Story 19. Not me, but my mom, waiting for the shower to be warm before stepping in. She grew up with a bathtub most of her life and didn't get a shower until she moved out of my grandparents' place in her 20s. She was apparently talking to a coworker about the winter weather one morning. While lamenting, she goes, "And don't you just hate getting into a cold shower on these cold days? It takes so long for the water to get warm." Coworker, Cheryl, you know you can just wait until the water gets warm, then hop in. The tub I used growing up was so far from the water heater that I could just put the plug in and turn on just the hot water. By the time the hot water got up there, the tub already had a good amount of cold water in it. When the tub was full, it was just the right temperature without ever turning on the cold. One of my test questions for my 4th grade science students was, explain why blow drying your hair in the shower is not a good idea. I also asked it at the beginning of a unit to see how much they knew about electricity. It's surprising, but many people don't understand the concept. Parents tell kids not to do something but don't explain why. Many times, things like this are never pointed out to kids. They just learn it by observing. You're really not alone here. Scientific illiteracy is a thing. The cold shower one seems to be just not thinking ahead. Maybe because they shower early in the morning and they're not awake. Applause for that teacher though, am I right? Story 20. That the porta potty doesn't somehow know when someone's inside, that the sign only changes to occupied when you physically lock the door. Many people walked in on me during my childhood. I was dragged to many outdoor craft fairs and whatnot as a child, so I had to use them more often than most other children. I work on random construction sites pretty often, and I'm in the habit of knocking briefly once before opening a porta potty, because I've been the one who opened the door on someone who didn't flip the lock. I do the same except I knock, then I follow it a few inches and immediately release it so it shuts again, before I finally open it all the way. I grew up working at festivals in the summer, and it happens way too often that folks don't react to the knock either because they don't realize it's for them, or because they assume they successfully locked the door. Once I implemented it, my strategy has never failed me, though it has many times caught people saying occupied after the intentional open/shut bit. When I got up today, I didn't know I was going to have a discussion about the etiquette of locking the door to a porta potty, but it was actually interesting. Story 21. I was like 22, working at a restaurant making myself a salad, and I asked the chef for bumps, and he stared at me for like 60 solid seconds, trying to figure out what I wanted. I explained to him I wanted bumps for my salad. I have the rest of the toppings, but now I needed bumps. Guys, my family told me croutons were called bumps my entire life. I called my dad that night and confirmed that bumps are indeed actually croutons. So why did my family call them bumps? Well, someone in my family had a speech problem as a kid, couldn't say croutons, and they became bumps. We had other funny names for stuff, but I knew what the real words were. I just never got around to learning croutons, I guess. It really bothers me when adults keep using silly or mispronounced words instead of saying the actual word. I was in high school still saying boo-boo because my mom wouldn't call it anything else. I didn't know what they were supposed to be called and got made fun of for it. My brother still says paschetti and pancakes instead of spaghetti and pancakes because that's the only way my grandmother pronounced it. My son has introduced a few words into our family's vocabulary. He's 4, but the words he comes up with make him sound like an old rancher or something. When something is messed up, it's all screwed up. When we're out hiking, he sometimes hears a snake off scrankling in the brush. We've never used baby talk with him, but he managed to make up some words anyway. I love invented family talk. It usually comes from young ones like this last one. It's so creative. Somebody should have gotten around to explaining what other people call those things so the family can refer to them in public though. Story 22. When I was getting my license on my 16th birthday, the lady at the DMV asked me if I wanted to register as an organ donor. My mom said yes, and I was horrified. I thought until 16 years of age that being an organ donor meant that if you needed your organ, they would contact you to come in and they would kill you. When my son was 6 or so, I took a call, was polite and non-committal, and got off the phone. I told my husband it was the Breast Cancer Foundation and asked if we should make a donation. My wide-eyed son said, "You would donate your breasts?" My My daughter was hysterically crying after I hung up a relatively non-committal phone call. When I asked why, she said, "Mommy, why are you giving away all your blood?" She'd overheard me making arrangements to donate blood. That must have been so scary for those kids. You just don't think to explain it because you know exactly what it means. One time I said to my little daughter, "I want to introduce you to someone," and she hid behind my legs. She later told me she didn't know what the introduction meant and didn't know what to do. Story 23. When I was in college, 21 or 22 years old, I was getting ready to go out, and it hit me like a lightning bolt. If you just thread the small end of the belt through the belt loops all the way around, literally any belt can fit your pants. Because up until then, I thought sometimes I just had belt loops that were too small for certain belt buckles. I ran out to my friends and was like, "Guys, check this out," as I proceeded to demonstrate for them what I had just learned. I genuinely thought they'd be excited for me. It was then I learned that everyone else on Earth knew the right way to wear a belt except my dumb self. Unbelievable how many times up until then I spent trying to jam the buckle side in first, and coming to the conclusion I just needed bigger belt loops. Unfortunately, this is a true story and I have no good excuse for why this dumb thing took me so long to figure out, except to say I'm a woman and didn't wear pants with belts that often. Believe it or not, I graduated from college and led a pretty successful and fulfilling life. We all do stupid stuff, and I'm glad this story of my stupid thing made so many of you laugh. I was just about the same age when I bought a pair of shorts that came with a belt. A roommate said they liked the belt, and I commented that it was a shame I couldn't wear it with any other pants, because it didn't come off the shorts because the buckle was bigger than the loops. My roommate was very kind. I love imagining the silence as your friends just watched you put on your belt like a normal person but excited. How could this person go so long without knowing how to thread a belt? I know she says she doesn't have many, but I still don't get it. On the positive side, a whole new world of fashionable belt using has been opened up for her. Story 24. That BOGO means buy one get one and isn't just a fun sound to yell when there's a sale. When the BOGO term came to be used, my mom saw a Payless ad on the TV and thought BOGO was a brand of shoes. I didn't get my driver's license until kind of late, first semester of college, but I worked in grocery stores before, so I was familiar with BOGO. Well, one day I was going out for something and my mom gave me her grocery list and debit card and asked me to grab a few things. Looked at the list, thought there were a few things she was unsure of and passed on picking them up from the store since money was tight. When I got home, she was like, "Why didn't you get the pizzas, detergent, or whatever it was?" Well, my mom would write BIGIF, her shorthand for buy one get one free. Complete miscommunication. I thought she wasn't sure if she should get it. She apparently didn't believe in writing it in BOGO terms. We had a laugh about that one for a bit. The B1G1F comment is hilarious because it looks like big if the mom wasn't sure about getting the item. I had to look at that for a minute to understand the reasoning. If she would have used BOGO, the daughter would have gotten it right away. Story 25. My mom's brother is gay, and I didn't realize until I was 22. He had been together with his now husband for like 40 years now or something, a long time. I was never explicitly told about their lifestyle, so I just never questioned it when I was a kid. It was just, "Hi Uncle John, hi Uncle Dave," no big deal. I graduated college and was driving to a nice restaurant with my parents, and all of a sudden out of nowhere it clicked. They were howling with laughter all the way to the restaurant. Couldn't believe it took me this long to figure it out. And then my uncles joined in too. Everyone had a good laugh at my expense. They joked that my school should yank my degree. Brilliant college grad indeed. Haha. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. My family was the same way. My dad's cousin always brought her close female friend to family holidays. I was 22 when they popped into my mind and I was like, "Oh, wow, Cousin Christy is gay." I called my best friend to tell her about it. She got quiet and then asked me if her mom's sister, who has lived with her friend for 20 plus years, is gay too. That's what growing up in very conservative families will do for you. My uncle was gay. He had a partner my whole life. We all knew, my dad included. Common knowledge amongst our friends as well. He wasn't exactly in the closet, but wasn't exactly out. Well, one of my friends was over and hanging with my parents, and she goes, "Well, Billy is gay," and my dad goes, "My brother's gay? What?" When I tell you my friend's face fell, then we all busted out laughing, this will always be funny. The world will always need more love and more laughing. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time!